Welcome to Power Summit 2023.
As we're going to start this session, which is on policy and regulatory dialogue, I'd like to invite on stage our session chair, Mr. D.B. Singh, Chairman, Electricity Regulatory Commission. We'd also like to invite the moderator of this session, Mr. Pankaj Batra, former Chairman, Central Electricity Authority, India. We'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Gokarna Raj Pantha, Secretary, ERC, Nepal. We'd like to invite on stage Mr. Raj Barua, Regulatory Expert, USAID, Urja, Nepal. We'd like to invite on stage Mr. Kumar Pandey, Advisor of IPPAN. We'd also like to invite Ms. Fanny Misfeld-Ringuis, Lead Energy Specialist, World Bank. I apologize if I butchered your name. We'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Anjan Neopane, partner at Neopane Law Associates, to kindly join us for this session. Once again, a last call to all our participants who are outside this hall to kindly come in and join us, as Hall AB is right on the dot. We really want to follow our timetable and our schedule for the Power Summit 2023, and so we are starting with this session, which is on policy and regulatory dialogue. Now, electricity policy and regulatory challenges are quite complex and diverse, and each country definitely faces its own unique set of issues. Common regulatory challenges include limited access to finance, political interference, and lack of transparency in the operations of regulatory agencies. Now, opening up power markets across countries can enable regional integration, allowing for multiple and diverse power supply contracts that can take advantage of load and time diversity and contribute to better utilization of resources across the region. This particular session will be discussing on this very topic and topics surrounding policy and regulatory dialogue. And without any further delay, may I please request the moderator of this session, Mr. Pankaj Batra, former Chairman, Central Electricity Authority, India, to kindly take over with the session.
Thank you for that introduction. I hope we try to make this session interesting because it's a little tricky after lunch and after each break. But I hope we can catch your attention. We've got very eminent panelists here, which the MC has already introduced. We will start with an initial address by the chairman, Mr. Dilip Bahadur Singh. He's the chairman of the Electricity Regulatory Commission of Nepal, which has been recently created. Recently in the sense, not very recent, but relatively recent. Yeah, 4 years, but I think the latest out of all the regulatory commissions in South Asia. So it's still young, but as we saw from Mr. Dilip Bahadur Singh, he hit the ground running, and he's already taken a lot of steps. So that's Dilip Bahadur Singh ji. So I hand over this to the chairman of the session, Mr. Dilip Bahadur Singh, for his initial remarks. And then we will go around to all the panelists, where we will give them the freedom to speak on what they like on the policy and regulatory dialogue, any views. After which I have a set of questions for them. So after Dilip Bahadur Singh ji gives his initial remarks, we will give about 5 minutes to each panelist so that they can have their say on the subject, after which we will go for questions. So I welcome Dilip Bahadur Singh ji.
Thank you very much. Let me go there, okay? Thank you very much, Mr. Bataji. Respected panelists, moderator, and contingent of power sector, both from abroad and Nepal. At the outset, I'm very much thankful to IPAN for giving me this opportunity for chairing the session. So also, I must thank the IPAN team for highlighting the need of saving our environment by emphasizing on developing clean energy, for choosing the theme of this Power Summit as broadening green energy market. Electricity Regulatory Commission, ERC, was established nearly four years back as per the ERC regulation and ERC Act. And the Commission is established as an autonomous and self-reliant body to regulate the electricity sector and to maximize the use of available resources under the provisions of the Act and regulation. That is to maintain balance between the demand and supply of electricity by making generation, transmission, distribution, and or trading of electricity in simplified, regular, systematic, and transparent manner. To regulate the electricity tariff, so also to protect the rights and interests of the electricity consumers. Many of you may or may not be knowing what ERC does and what we are mandated by the Act and regulation. Let me tell you something about that. We are supposed to, and we are mandated to perform technical management of electricity sector, determine electricity consumer tariff and power purchase rate of electricity, maintain competition in electricity sector and protect rights of consumers, perform in organizational capacity development of electricity sector, make policy recommendations to the government, investigate, inspect, and provide directions to the licensees, formulate and implement bylaws, guidelines, norms, directives, standards, and codes, and definitely to resolve disputes. And for this, ERC has the right to exercise the power of district court, and our verdict could not be changed or challenged by anybody or institution except the appellate court, because our institution is a quasi-judicial commission. So major achievements what we have done is we have already enacted nearly a dozen of regulatory instruments. They are bylaws on PPA and conditions to be followed by licensees, guidelines regarding procedures of meeting of ERC, directive relating to determination of consumer tariff, directives for initial public offering and right share offering, directives relating to operation of public hearing, acquisition, merger, amalgamation, transfer of shares, purchase and sale of plant, monitoring and pre-approval for issuance of shares, employee administration bylaws, members administration bylaws, financial administration bylaws, regulatory roadmap, and definitely Grid Code of Nepal. And in near future, we will be preparing guidelines for nearly a dozen, again, which are on very initial stage, some are at the last stage. So first and foremost, rights protection of the consumer protection rights, which is at the final stage. We are getting and seeking feedback from the different stakeholders, dispute resolution bylaws, internal conduct of business, internal control system, determination of generation tariff on brownfield of hydropower projects and PPA, utilization of ERC fund, regulatory accounting system, regulatory information management system, technical standards of utility, directives on general tariff of hydropower projects, grid code, distribution code, and much talked about open access guidelines and guidelines for wheeling charge for the transmission lines. Our working modality is something similar to that of Cabinet of the Government of Nepal. Any petition received by ERC will be scrutinized by the respective officers, and if all the documents are attached as per the Act, regulation, and guidelines, and all the conditions are met, then the Secretary makes a proposal which will be accepted by the Chairman to put on the Commission meeting. The proposal has to be given to the members 24 hours before the meeting, as similar to the Cabinet meeting. Then all the members will study the files and petitions and take a decision on the meeting. ERC is new institution. In the similar manner, the private sector involvement in power sector is not very old. So ERC has been working more a facilitator along with working as a regulator. That is working like a scout than working like a police. In these little less than 4 years, we have done quite a lot of things. We have already given a verdict and decisions to 559 petitions, so 66 of which are related to issuance of IPO, initial public offering and right shares, 95 approvals for change in shareholding structure, 85 to the determination of PPA and granting consent to PPA, 258 consent to amendment of power purchase agreement, 20 to merger and acquisition, and 35 on sale and purchase of electricity, purchase and sale by licensee share. And others, we have some other things also, by which I must tell the panelists and friends that 3 years back, a delegation came from small hydropower group, 25 of them. They said that we are closing up our stations. We'll hand over our key to ERC or government of Nepal because the energy produced by us cannot even pay the interest. So we are not going to that until and unless you do not do something tangible to us. Then I said that, please don't do like that. We will do something. Then what happened? I mean, I personally talked to the governor of Nepal and briefed him all these things and convinced him of these things. And I requested and suggested him to provide refinancing facility at the rate of 3%, because initial interest rate would be 12, 13%. And if it is refinancing at 3% return or 3% interest rate, all the projects would be viable. Similarly, waiver of penalty based on availability declaration due to change of hydrology for hydropower projects less or equal to 10 megawatt. What happens? I mean, the hydropower projects are supposed to give chart of the energy they will be supplying to the NEA, Nepal Electricity Authority, 1 month beforehand. After 1 month or during 1 month, what happens to the hydrology, what happens to the rainfall, river discharge, nobody knows. That's why always they are in trouble. Let's say, if they are thinking that they can supply electricity worth of 1 crore rupees, and due to less discharge, due to less rain, if they cannot produce that, if let's say they can produce worth of 60 lakhs only, then 40 lakhs they have already lost. And for the energy equivalent to 40 lakhs, they have to pay penalty to NEA amounting to 40 lakhs. So they got 60 lakhs and they are paying 80 lakhs. So most of the small hydropower projects, they are at the verge of being bankrupt. So what we did, we invited NEA people, we invited the private sector people, and we discussed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds and come to a consensus that not 1 month, in 1 week they can give the declaration so that NEA could also stabilize its system, because they have to buy energy from India or any other places. So they have to stabilize the system, as well as the private sector developers. They are not gone bankrupt. So by all these things, nearly 49 hydropower projects, they are economically sustainable now. So apart from that, I mean, we have offered multiple level of inputs to the draft of Common Minimum Grid Code prepared by SAFIR, provided comments on reports of study on South Asia energy regulation to develop a regulatory roadmap for electricity exchange and energy cooperation among South Asian countries, prepared by SARI Energy, provided comments on report of study on transition from bilateral to trilateral and multilateral power trade in South Asia and other things. Future steps, we are at the verge of publishing Grid Code of Nepal. We are taking seeking comments from the stakeholders, and we are harmonizing with the common minimum grid code prepared by SAFIR. And it is very important to understand that ERC is mandated to act as per the Policy and Act of Nepal. So once the policy is made by the ministry or the act is revised and the issues of power trade, open access are incorporated, then instantly the guidelines for electricity trade, open access and wheeling charge will be made by ERC. But till then, we have to wait for the government policy. Without policy, we cannot do anything. And we hear sometimes in the grapevine that we have not prepared guidelines. Without policy, we cannot prepare guidelines. It's for sure. So the ministry is now, I believe that ministry is working on preparing a policy. And once it comes, then we will definitely do our work. Let me talk about broadening of green energy market as per the theme. Nepal is at the verge of being a net exporter of clean green energy, offsetting some portion of the black and brown energy prevailing in this region. The vision of one sun, one world, one grid, put forward by Right Honorable Prime Minister of India, is the impetus for all the nations of this region at the initial stage, and then to various regions to develop clean energy and share benefit among the participating countries. So also, to carry this notion forward, a roundtable discussion on interconnection of regional grids in South Asia, incorporating Gulf Coordinating Council GCC grid, South Asia grid, ASEAN grid, was organized by India Smart Grid Forum, ISGF, on March 3, 2023, in partnership with USAID, SAREP, and EU. Similarly, on 2nd March, SAFIR has organized a program whereby we have understood broader vision for the power, trade, and cooperation in this thing. During this session, it was revealed that the initial planning was being done so that BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal of South Asian countries will be connected by transmission grid, which will be linked to Thailand via Myanmar. Once Thailand will be connected to this South Asian grid, then automatically it will be connected to the ASEAN grid, meaning our clean green energy produced in Nepal can be sold in Singapore also. In the previous session, Mr. Bandyopadhyay has already mentioned it. We can sell them. But before that, formation of South Asian Power Pool is also needs to be done, and it's being conceptualized. On the western part of India, South Asian grid will be connected to United Arab Emirates via Pakistan, Afghanistan, Oman. Similarly, from Gujarat in India, undersea cable line will be connected to Oman and then to United Arab Emirates. The next round of development would be to connect the African grid from United Arab Emirates towards south and European grid towards the north via Turkey. Can you imagine what will happen then? Our energy could be sold in Africa and Europe too. Can you believe it? Then our potential, which was estimated to be 83,000 megawatt, estimated back in 1960s, can soar up to 200,000 megawatt as per the demand of the region. Can you visualize that once all these plannings are implemented and our hydropower, solar, and wind energy are fully developed, what would be our socio-economic status? Then we will also be the inhabitant of a prosperous nation, not poor nation. However, it might take a couple of decades, but sooner or later, it is bound to happen. Then, as envisaged by our late great poet Lakshmi Prasad Devkota, उहाँले भन्नुभएको थियो सुनको बिहान आउँछ भनेर. He had told that a golden morning will come to us. It will definitely come to us, and I'm sure that it will come to us. But for that, all of us, you, me, and all the stakeholders, need to work very hard day and night. Good luck and goodbye now.
Thank you, Dilip Bahadur Singh ji, for covering a wide scope, spectrum of in your address. So this is a policy and regulatory dialogue with respect to broadening green energy market. Everything in a country normally starts with a policy. Whenever some new thing comes, it starts with a policy, which comes from the government. It is followed by regulations, which is the scope of the regulator. So the regulations are made in accordance with the policy. And then, of course, things start moving. So therefore, this is actually a very important session. This actually initiates or pioneers how a country is going to move. So I think it's a session which is really important. Nepal, just to give you a background of Nepal, is predominantly hydro. I mean, most people know it, but maybe some people who come from outside may not know it. And more than 50% generation is from the private sector. Unlike many of the other countries where most of the generation is government controlled. Because there are geological surprises which take place, and therefore, if some private sector bids, he has to manage on his own. I mean, they don't get any compensation, whereas the government can get support from the government. Now, in Nepal, the NEA buys power from the independent power producers at a pre-decided rate. So it gives some amount of comfort that they will get this rate, and that rate is pretty okay. But now with so much of capacity coming in Nepal, and the demand of Nepal not expanding so much, the IPPs are looking to export this power outside the country, which is already happening. The export is going up. So actually, hydro is a very crucial balancing device for intermittent renewables, of which solar and wind is coming in a large percentage in South Asia, and starting with India and then Bangladesh, and now, of course, Bhutan and Nepal are also thinking of getting into solar and wind. So hydro is a very good resource for balancing this. But the only thing is that most of the projects in Nepal are pure runoff river. So there is one storage which has come up recently, and there needs to be a little more of one. Yeah, so there needs to be a little more of storage, considering how the globe is moving towards intermittent renewables. More of storage and pondage, which is I think so Nepal can actually act like the battery of South Asia, but you must have that sort of hydro which is capable of being flexible. This is something which I think there needs to be some transition, at least mindset change. It's more expensive to build a storage and pondage. It's also more time-taking, more geological surprises. But I think that's the way to go. And I'm sure that Nepal is actually thinking in that direction. And if that's what happens, Nepal and countries like Bhutan and Nepal can actually become the batteries of South Asia. And of course, it's a clean energy resource. So I think it plays a big part in South Asia. Now I thought I'll just give you a background of the significance of hydro and broadening green energy market. Now, just to also tell you that most of these hydro projects earlier were through PPAs, pre-decided tariffs, and also sale for longer term periods was also through pre-decided rates. But now, recently, Nepal has taken part in the power exchange market and have actually gained substantially. because the power exchange prices in the last 1 year were very high due to the fuel crisis which has engulfed the world. But maybe that's not going to be the case later. So when we talk about a market, it's not only the short-term market. The power exchange is a short-term market. They can be long-term contracts also based on market, where you can call for bids for a tariff for 25 years, which is also a market. So I think there has to be a mix of long-term and short-term contracts for any country. I'm just talking from the policy point of view. And in India, we thought that it should be around 80 or 85% long-term and 15% short-term, but that can be rethought of in the future. The reason is that projects will not get funded if there is not a stable source of revenue. So now what Nepal is thinking of is having in each project partly long-term and partly short-term. In fact, more long-term and partly short-term. I think about 85 long-term and 15% short-term, which is a good practice for any country. Okay, having given some amount of background to this, now I'd like to tap into the resources of the panelists. Let's first start with Mr. Gokarna Rajpanta, who is the Secretary, ERC Nepal. So I'd like each panelist to talk for about 5 minutes. We are okay with 5 minutes. And then we will take it for questions later. It's always more good to be more interactive session so that it keeps the audience and us alive. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Respected Chair, Moderator, panelists, and audience. Namaste and good afternoon. First of all, I want to give thanks to the Independent Power Producers Association Nepal, IPAN, for conducting such a wonderful Power Summit 2023. We are going to be with surplus electricity production in near future. That's why we have to increase electricity consumption and export to neighboring countries. In this scenario, I think the Power Summit with the motto broadening green energy markets is very relevant and will be useful. The Electricity Act 1992 of Nepal has given the access to the private sector for power production, transmission, and distribution. There is no clear-cut legal provision for the power trade licensing for private sector till now. Though we are trying to draft power trade guidelines, but not able to implement it. Electricity Regulatory Commission was established in 2019 on the basis of Electricity Regulatory Commission Act 2017. This Regulatory Commission is facilitating in the electricity sector development except the licensing part. It is also responsible for fixing the electricity tariff in the country. ERC has prepared a dozen of bylaws and directives regarding tariff fixation, power purchase agreement, PPA, licenses conditions, company merger and acquisition, public hearing, share issues, etc. Still, more than these bylaws and directives have to be prepared to run the ERC smoothly. The excess production of electricity has become the market commodity in our country. The government-owned Nepal Electricity Authority is involving in the power trade, buying the electricity with domestic power producers and selling it IEX Indian day-ahead market. NEA has got the permission to export about 453 megawatt power to India from different power plants. In the beginning, bilateral power trade with India has been started and it will be expanded in the regional level of South Asian countries. Physical as well as institutional infrastructures are underdeveloped for bilateral and regional power trade. At present, the country is capable to export-import about 1,500 megawatt electricity by Dhalkebar, Muzaffarpur, and other interconnection with India. Butol-Gorakhpur 400 kV cross-border transmission line will be another milestone which will be constructed very soon and will help to export power to India. Similarly, the planned Duhabi, Purnia, Lamki-Barali cross-border lines will be developed to export the power produced in Nepal. Bilateral forums with India and Bangladesh are working on the electricity market. SAARC, BIMSTEC, BBIN countries are also discussing and planning to develop the electricity market in South Asia region. In the regulatory part, South Asia Forum for Infrastructure Regulation, SAFIR, will be the useful forum to enhance the electricity market in this region. ERC is going to endorse the grid code prepared by Nepal Electricity Authority in near future, making more relevant in the present context. It will help to power trade inside as well as cross-border level. Similarly, ERC will develop different regulatory equipment after the power trade license and open access permission for private sector will be in place with the approval of long-awaited new electricity bill. We are also trying to be the member of SAFIR, which will be the main institutional infrastructure for regional integration, especially for power markets. Common minimum grid code will be another support for regional electricity market. Our commission is actively participating to discuss on its draft. In addition to Electricity Regulatory Commission, ERC, Maori and DOD are also responsible for policy and licensing, and NEA is responsible for transmission network as grid or system operator. The coordination among them is the vital factor for power trade. Electricity Act 1992 should be amended as soon as possible to open the door of power trade for private sectors. Third, legal provision with Act amendment on policy decision on open access to the transmission line should be taken as soon as possible. Before that, if possible, need assessment and transmission capacity availability study will be useful for taking the policy decision. ERC should prepare power market open access and wheeling charge guidelines on the basis of ERC Act 2017 after amendment in Electricity Act 1992, especially on power trade and open access license arrangement for private sectors. Fifth, the government should take the initiation to increase electricity consumption with good quality and power trade in parallel way. Sixth, policy and regulatory dialogues should be frequently conducted in the developers, bureaucracy, and political levels to enhance bilateral and regional level integration, especially for power trade. At last, but not least, international practices and experiences are more important to implement the regulation and acts of our country. We, newly established ERC, wants to learn more from other panelists in this Power Summit 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pant. So some of the important things he said were that SAFIR, now SAFIR is the South Asia Forum on Infrastructure Regulation, which also takes care of electricity. So that's actually not an official body which is formed by the governments, but it's a association of individuals. But it's still very helpful because it helps to discuss all these regulations of South Asian countries and at least informally arrive at a consensus. It's very important to have consensus among the South Asian nations if you want to, you need to have harmonization of policies, regulations. And this is one way of going about it. So let's see, in case this body becomes official, that means recognized by all the governments. But in any case, there are informal associations operating, which is the South Asia Forum of Infrastructure Regulation for regulators. There are also informal meetings between the utilities which take place, but that's not an association where all the countries take place, it's between two countries. But it'd be good to have some sort of, these bring about harmonization. The other thing which he mentioned was the common minimum grid code, which is important. if we want to operate the system in a safe and secure manner, exchange electricity but still operate in a safe and secure manner, you need to have technical rules to be followed by all countries. It's not a simple thing like connecting roads, because it's got a lot of other, electricity has got many other complications. For example, there is angular stability problem, there's a voltage profile problem. The whole grid can trip if it's not properly designed, or if it's not if there's no harmony among the regulations. So that's an important one, which is actually prepared under the SARI program and handed over to Safir for taking it further. Also, he mentioned about the Electricity Act of Nepal, which is again a law. And if a law has enabling features for cross-border electricity trade, then it's good, because then you don't, otherwise what happened in the case of Bangladesh, for example, was when this power trade between Nepal and Bangladesh was being discussed. In Bangladesh, it went through all the ministries to get approval, one by one. So it took a long time, and it's still not cleared. So if you have it in the act itself, it doesn't need to go through the ministries. So that's why it's important to have this in the act itself. The act is law. So if the law is there, then nothing more is required. And of course, enabling regulations. So these are some of the important things which Mr. Pant pointed out. I think Mr. Michael Stanfield from Norwegian thing is not there, right? Yeah, okay. So otherwise it would have been useful to get his inputs, because Norway acts like the battery of Europe. It's got huge reservoirs which acts as balancing generation to the wind and solar which is existence on a large scale in Europe. So we look forward to, of course, Nepal and Bhutan being a battery to South Asia, just like Laos. Laos is the battery for Southeast Asia. So this is something which would be very good. I next come to Mr. Raj Barua, who's a regulatory expert from USAID Urja Nepal. And of course, he's not acting on behalf of any organization. Those are independent views. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll try it again. Good afternoon, everybody. There we go. I just want to see if you're awake, you know. Thank you, thank you. All right, see. I would sing and dance also, but I'm not allowed to, apparently. Thank you, Chairman Singh, Chairman Bartra, fellow panelists, and IPAN, especially Shailesh Mishra. Where is he? I want to thank him for getting me here. He's been very helpful for inviting me to this panel. My thanks also goes to Mr. Robert Kramer. He is the current Chief of Party for Urja Nepal, Deloitte's program here, funded by USAID, and Mr. Shankar Kagi, of USAID here in Nepal. I would not be here without their support. Just so that there is no misunderstanding, I am employed by Deloitte Consulting. I am here in Nepal on assignment for USAID's Urja Nepal project. My comments today are attributed to yours truly and do not represent any positions of the US government, USAID, Deloitte, or the Urja Nepal project. When you work in a regulatory commission for 35 years, you know how to do these disclaimers up front. So that's out of practice. Also, please bear with me, as I'm not an engineer. I'm not a lawyer, sorry. And I don't have, and my professional background is in public policy, excuse me, with a specialization in energy policy. So ergo, I identify myself as an energy policy analyst. That's a strange profession. My children don't know that. The topic assigned to me today is broad. There is a plethora of books and research written about the American electricity experience in the last 30 years. And I will try to synthesize all of that in my allotted 5 minutes. If you believe that, I have a bridge across the river that I'd like to sell to you. I may begin with depressing news, but I promise that I'll end on a high note, okay? Just bear with me. Let me start by stating two laws. Funny that one of them just happened just now. And in the end of my remarks, you'll understand why I tell you about these two laws. The first is from social sciences, which states that Unintended consequences are outcomes of a purposeful action that are not intended or foreseen. That seems obvious. The second is called Murphy's Law. I don't know how many of you have heard it, which states that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and at the worst possible time. See what happened to the mic? That was Murphy's Law. And I'm sure we all, have had that happen to us in our lives. So I will use my summarizing statement for today as an introduction. How novel is that? My summarizing statement is this: be careful what you ask for. You may not like what it becomes, okay? With that dire and depressing message, here is my overview of the US power regulation market. I hope I can shed some light, and there's no pun intended there, on the actual structure of the US electricity market. But to understand the US electricity market, I have to give you some political context. It is really different from other countries. The US Constitution, and I'm not doing a social studies class here, the US Constitution, in its 10th Amendment, states that the federal government only has those powers delegated to itself in the Constitution. The rest of the functions reside with the 50 states, and electricity, as I understand, was not available when the document was written 200 years ago. So, in addition to the US Constitution, each state has its own constitution, its own flag, its own seal. I carry one. State bird, state flower, we could go on and on. So what does this mean for the electricity sector? Why am I telling you all these things? Simply put, all electricity service that is within a state's boundary is regulated by that state's utility commission. This is distribution service and distribution tariffs for service to nearly all end-use customers in that state, just like you and me. So what remains? All electricity services that cross a state border is under the jurisdiction of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, usually known as FERC. These are the transmission facilities and transmission rates, what is usually called the wheeling charges in the rest of the world. So what about the wholesale power markets and prices? Get ready for some shock now. Here are some things that I'm going to tell you that will shock you. United States does not have a unified power market. That's it, it does not. If somebody told you that, they're lying, or they're fibbing actually, which is like lying, but not as much lying. The FERC does not regulate wholesale power prices. The FERC does not regulate wholesale power prices. These are market-based prices or bilateral contracts or auctions. Somebody mentioned auctions just now. The price is what it is. And later, I'll give you an example of what can and has gone wrong. One important function of FERC that it has is it ensures there is no market manipulation and that it can impose penalties for market abuse. That's a very important function, and I hope, Mr. Singh, you can have that function. It's really important. Therefore, a much-used statement that the US power market is deregulated is incorrect. More starkly, is false. There are regional power markets with independent system operators. Furthermore, only 1/3 of the United States, that is about 17 states, have restructured their individual state electricity industries and allowed distribution customers to select alternative licensed electric suppliers within one distribution company's service territory, and that is called retail choice. By the way, just for reference, I talked to you about the federal-state relationship. There are instances when the state governments and the state regulators take the federal government and the federal regulators to court over jurisdictional disputes. It happens. That's why the profession that my friend here represents is very viable and very functioning. That's the law profession. He's smiling. He wants to do that now. Now let me briefly touch on independent system operators and regional transmission operators, ISOs, RTOs, and regional electricity markets. ISOs, RTOs, TSOs in some countries, they all have the same function, and I'll just use the term ISO. If you ever see an electricity grid map of the US, and if I knew I had a big screen here, I would have brought it, you will see large parts not covered by the ISOs. This does not mean that there is no electric service or no service in those areas. Rather, there is no ISO or wholesale electric market in those areas. So there is utilities. So what is an ISO? In the US, again, this is a novel one. In the US, nearly all electric companies are private utilities historically. For 100 years, they have been for private utilities, transmission and distribution and generation. Therefore, we in the US never went through a phase of privatization from state-owned utilities to private companies. That's it. It's always been private utilities, okay? In our system, a group of electric companies whose service territories are adjacent to each other, next to each other, and interconnected, may get together by agreement amongst themselves and form an ISO. That ISO will operate the transmission facility. That ISO will not own the transmission lines. It'll just operate it. But again, it is by agreement between the private utilities that are adjacent to each other. So that's a very interesting concept. I don't think it exists elsewhere. And all of these agreements are, of course, approved by the federal regulator. So the next step in the ISO process is to create a wholesale electricity market, a day-ahead market, a spot market. There's been references about it all day today. Please note that again in our system, a little different, a direct bilateral trade between a generator and a consumer. Let's say there are 3 states apart, but within the same ISO, they do not, I repeat, they do not have to reveal their prices of that trade. All they have to reveal is how much power and at what time is that power going to flow. That's all the ISO needs to know. So nobody knows what price they made that deal, unless they reveal it by themselves. So that's another different concept. So as you can see, for us, there is a legal and political basis for our energy market, not just the engineering function. The engineering function is the same as in any other country. So now for the good part, I give you all the bad news, now I'll give you the good news. I have lived and worked for the past 40 years in the PJM service area, the state I live in. As the state I live in is Delaware, where the president is from. Just wanted to let you know. As many of you know, PJM is one of the largest electricity markets in the world. One of the largest, not just the US, in the world. It became an independent entity in the 1990s, late 1990s. At that time, the average real-time inflation-adjusted annual wholesale power price at PJM, I got this down correctly, was about $25 per megawatt hours. That price increased to about $58 around 2008, which is about the time that there was a financial crisis around the world and in the US. But in 2019, that price dropped to below $20 per megawatt hours, which is lower than what it was 30 years ago. The wholesale market price fluctuates because it is based on primarily world energy prices. Okay, so that's one thing. So this is a success story, but it is about a well-run, well-organized electricity market. That's the key word, well-run and well-organized. You have to get your rules in place ahead of time. So as I mentioned, the US system is different from the South Asian system, not in terms of energy engineering, but in terms of the political and economic system. So now for the part about the Murphy's Law. 2 years ago in Texas, they had an extremely cold week, a whole week, and natural gas could not flow to the generators. The natural gas could not flow to the generators, so that led to a shortage of power, which in turn led to a spike in wholesale energy prices. Just, natural. It just happened. The wholesale market behaved as it should have, in terms of economic theory. Okay, low supply resulted in high prices. But when you have human life losses, Due to extreme cold weather and non-availability of electricity, no amount of physics or economics can appease the customers. One loss of human life is too much. Yes, the customers who happen to be voting public saw their electric bill skyrocket. After that week, the regulators were replaced by the state governor and the ISO board resigned. Why? That's politics, and it was within the law. Did the physical infrastructure of the generating plants and wires change after those resignations and firings? No, they still remain the same. The engineers were still the same. Well, maybe gradually things will change, but it'll cost money to upgrade the physical infrastructure, which will be paid by, guess who? The same customers who also happen to be the voting public. Let's wait and see in the next elections and see if these voters remember that cold week in February of 2021. So thank you for your patience, and I hope I made some sense into a confusing subject matter or left you with your head shaking in disbelief. Please do not, my final advice is, don't copy from another system. Take the best practices, discard the worst practices, and remember, do not reinvent the wheel. It is perfect, okay? I thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for that very engaging talk, Mr. Barua. Yeah, you did say that if things go wrong, they will. And I think I also did something wrong. I should have actually thanked IPAN in the beginning. I'm doing it in the middle. So thanks, IPAN, for getting together such a large gathering of more than 750 delegates, I'm told. And people from all over South Asia, but also from developed countries, from the World Bank, IMF, and so many international organizations. I think this is one of the largest power sector gatherings in South Asia, getting all people together. So thank you very much. Now we go to the next speaker, Mr. Kumar Pandey, advisor, Independent Power Producers Association of Nepal, and a very experienced person. So go ahead.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. I will just make a few brief comments, and a lot of what I have to say will probably be not new to most of you, because these are things that we've been talking about for a long time. I will speak mostly as a private investor, as a private sector individual, and I will try to focus my words on how we in the private sector view the electricity regulator, what we want it to be, what it is at the moment, and how we think we could actually benefit from it in the coming days. So the private sector has grown in the last 25 years beyond what any of us expected when we started this campaign about 25 years ago. And I don't want to get into the details of that, but you know, just the fact that the private sector presently owns about 50% of the grid capacity is enough to make my point clear. So given that the private sector is so active and so vibrant, it is important that we have a regulator that can be a fair arbiter, an institution that can create a level playing field, and someone that can actually put a transparent system in place so that all the players in the system, the government sector, the public sector, the private sector, the government committees, as we start international trade, foreign partners, our trading partners, all know the rules, all know what we are engaging in, and we all know what to follow, and there are no surprises. Murphy's Law will definitely come in from time to time, but the more we can minimize it, the better. So that is, the baseline for where we want the ERC to be. When we advocated for the ERC for a long time before it was established, this is what we wanted. We wanted to make sure that the private sector that's active in the field gets a fair chance, that it is not nipped in the bud by some authorities that are there. So that is what we wanted, and I think we did get a we were very happy that we did get an ERC eventually. So I think ERC now that it has been formed has done some very important things for which we should be thankful. I think the chairman, reiterated a list of activities that they've concluded and they've achieved. I don't want to get into those. I think those are good things, and they will help us as we go ahead. At the same time, I think we expect something more. I think besides just doing what is statutorily or by legal requirements important, we require a proactive ERC, or ERC that can look at the future, plan the horizon, not planning from the government's perspective or the National Planning Commission's way, but from a regulatory perspective, what needs to be planned, what needs to go ahead. So in that sense, we're hopeful that the few things that were mentioned just now, the wheeling charge, the open access, grid code, these will come online quickly, because these are critically important for us to continue to expand in this sector. So I'm hopeful that those will come on time, and we've been talking about them for a while, so I'm really looking forward to those coming in. And when they do come in, I really hope that the private sector has been engaged enough in the preparation of those documents, so that we do not have to start opposing it the next day, that we feel we're comfortable with working with it. So I really ask the chairman, the secretary of ERC that are here to actually make the effort to go ahead with that. Now, so that's the present, that's where we are. But that's actually simply not enough. I think the ERC needs to go a lot further, and we need to get a lot more done, right? And there are challenges, okay? The challenges in the market that we're facing right now. I mean, there are challenges that we've talked about for a long time that I don't want to get into, especially that don't involve the ERC. Tree cutting has been a problem for us for 30 years, but that's not your business. So I won't bother you with that. But I think there are issues that ERC needs to solve and ERC needs to address. And those are basically creating open markets, opening the market both for domestic trade as well as for international trade. I mean, if we cannot get domestic trading in place, there's no way we can actually talk about international trade. It just doesn't make sense. So I think that is important. It's important for ERC to send pricing signals as we try to expand the domestic market. How is it that we're going to expand the domestic market? Well, what ERC can do is send pricing signals that if electricity consumption is to be expanded in the country that we're talking about, then there needs to be pricing signals that ERC should be able to send. So I think this is something we should all talk about. So on a much higher level, what do we want ERC to be? Well, ERC needs to be a sectoral expert. We need to have people there with the expertise in the sector, in both trading, market, regulation, all of that. Without that expertise, I don't think ERC is going to get very far. I think ERC needs to be autonomous. It needs to be autonomous in its decision making. It needs to be autonomous both financially and from the political point of view. Because if we don't have an autonomous body, it'll just be bullied around, right? It's not going to get anything done. We need ERC to be a fair arbiter. Every time there's something that needs to be arbitrated, ERC should be able to step in and make the right decisions. If it cannot do that, then the value drops drastically, right? So I think, but ERC needs to be free of political influence. I think that's critical for any regulator. If it cannot be free from political influence, there's no way it's going to do its job properly. Unfortunately, I think in these last few items that I've stated, we failed in the last few years. And I think the chairman and the secretary here that are present will agree with me on that. That we know that ERC has not been able to move out of that, or hasn't had the space to move out of that, and we've had tremendous setbacks in the process. So I think, because if we cannot get the government of Nepal to see the importance of autonomous ERC, or government of Nepal does not appreciate an independent and a fair ERC, then obviously we're not going to get an ERC that can do its job. So I ask, I call upon the government of Nepal to actually internalize this, that they need to address this issue, that they must understand that the ERC needs to be autonomous, the ERC needs the space to work in, and this is the only way it's going to go forward. So I think that is extremely important for us, because if the government of Nepal and ERC cannot coordinate their policies, cannot coordinate their activities, then it's all of us will suffer, and most importantly, I think the private sector will suffer. We must understand that the private sector has a huge investment in the hydropower business. And we talk about maybe $10 billion kind of numbers here. So if these projects are to fail, if this sector is to fail, it will be a major failure for the country. So I think keeping in mind the importance of the sector and the importance of a solid and sound regulator. I think we need to have all these things in place. So I will leave you with those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for giving your views, the private sector, and wish list for the regulator. Yeah, I agree. Whenever a new regulator is formed, we've generally seen earlier all the functions used to be done by the policymaker. When a regulator is carved out of the policymaker, there are certain turf wars which happen. This function was mine, and now it's gone to somebody else. So the people, they have little hesitation in letting go. But I hope they do let go. It actually eventually turns out like that. And hopefully you get enough staff for that, the regulators. Next, I ask Ms. Fenny, Ms. Felt Ringes, lead energy specialist of the World Bank, for her views.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ipan, for inviting us to participate at this very important conference. Before going into some of the difficult issues or reiterating possibly what some of the previous panelists have said, I just wanted to maybe remind ourselves and commend everyone in the room that Nepal has come a long way in terms of its development of its power sector. In the year 2000, barely 25% of the people of Nepal had access to electricity. Today, it's 95%. In 2010, 2009, power outages were 10 to 12 hours, costing the economy a lot. Now, I might get annoyed if the power goes away for a minute or so, but it comes back pretty quickly. So a big congratulations to everyone in the room here and everyone on the panel, from whichever country you come from, because I know you have contributed and helped Nepal to get where it is today. And I think with that expertise in the room, I think the remaining challenges should be, peanuts. It should be very easy to deal with, even if maybe for everyone in the room it might seem that these are big challenges. As the World Bank and as financiers, we look at the economics of the project that we finance. So, meaning that we don't look necessarily at only at whether a project is financially viable in the energy sector, but we also look at, more importantly, whether the country as a whole benefits economically from the project. And it's one of the key criteria that were introduced by our President McNamara in the 1970s, who realized that maybe we weren't financing the right project. Maybe the project we were financing back then weren't really benefiting the people that we are supposed to support. And, all of you here present are shareholders of the World Bank, so we are accountable to you all in that sense. What we do know also is that the economics of hydropower in Bhutan and in Nepal are compelling. You have some of the best hydropower resources in the world, and economically they can benefit not only Nepal and Bhutan, and I mean everyone has said that today, but also India and Bangladesh, other countries, maybe even Sri Lanka if the interconnector gets built. So then the question is, why is this not moving forward, right? What is keeping us from realizing this potential and making it available to the rest of South Asia? And the challenges are both found at the domestic level as well as the regional level. Now, we as financiers, what we can do is contribute with financing. So about 20 years ago, the World Bank looked at the tools we have available for financing. And all of our tools were limited to financing only country projects. A project in Nepal, a project in India, a project in Sri Lanka, a project in Bhutan. But it didn't allow us to really bring countries together and finance a regional project. So for those countries that are eligible for IDA, we introduced a regional IDA financing envelope. And that means that if a project can demonstrate that it contributes to regional development, say in the energy sector, brings countries together, interconnects countries, then for 1/3 of country envelope, we can offer another 2/3 of financing to that country that promotes this project. And with this financing, we have been able to, in the energy sector, support many power pools. Let me give you the example of the West African Power Pool. That was a process and project program that I've been involved in 10 years ago, and where West Africa was a continent or part of a continent that was not even interconnected at all. Most countries had barely power enough to supply to the capital cities. And with the help of some very visionary, representatives from the West African Power Pool, the chairman, some very visionary power executives, we were able to support a program that today enables to interconnect literally all of West Africa. And that was financed with this financing tool. Now, we would now, and as our regional vice president said at the very beginning, like to use this financing tool to also support countries like Nepal and Bhutan to enable some of that some of those transformational projects. We would be very honored and humbled to be part of this process. So in concluding, I would like to say congratulations on what everyone in the room has already done. And there's only a little bit left to do. And I mean, with the perseverance and patience of everyone and your expertise, I'm sure you can get to where you want to be. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very optimistic World Bank. Thank you. We will now go to the final panelist, Mr. Lawyer, Mr. Neopane. See how you can manage the time because the time is over. Can you argue something on that?
Thank you. Thank you. Hello? Yes. Thank you, sir. The time is exceeded, so I will make my comments very short. In terms of the Electricity Act, which has been discussed multiple times and where we are heading in terms of the regulatory framework, the government has done very good work by introducing the Electricity Regulatory Commission. So it is definitely a start, and of course, much work has to be done in that regard. But one of the controversial things has been the Electricity Act, because the first amendment, the first replacement to the existing Electricity Act in 1992 was in fact drafted in 2009. And since there have been 3 drafts, and also I'm hearing that the 4th draft is being prepared in the ministry. So again, it is how the law is made much depends on where the politics is heading and how the political actors are viewing the market. So where we are now at the moment is that Electricity Act 1992 liberalized the electricity production market, and now we have around 2,148 megawatt of operating projects. We have 7,619 megawatts of generation license applications, and 8,667 megawatt of generation license has been issued. And currently there is around 12,000 megawatts of survey license issued. So there's 26,000 megawatts of projects that are yet to be financed and for which license has been issued. So where does this take us? Is that there's only one purchaser of electricity. Definitely people have invested a lot of money in doing survey for these projects. Since there's only one purchaser of electricity, and now again export market to India has opened up, the government is thinking about having another power trader in the market. And again, this has also been controversial because some aspects of the political body, they want the existing Nepal Electricity Authority to have a monopoly on power trade with India because they view the electricity as a natural resource. But there's another view that introducing competition in the market will enhance this market for everyone, including the consumers, and also allow Nepal to get a better rate for both power producers and for consumers. So the main thing is how to to license trading of electricity, and also the act that was tabled also allowed that, which is a positive move. However, there's various issues about level playing field between NEA, government entities, and private sector. That is where the main dispute is about. So the existing bill that was tabled in 2000 and was withdrawn in 2022, and a new act is being drafted. So we are still, in terms of the legal policy, we are still in a limbo. And I think that the problem is that the proper study has not been done, proper policy analysis is not being done on what should be the future of the energy market. So unless we have a clear vision in the political front, we might see another couple of drafts of the electricity bill moving around before we have something concrete. But again, everyone has to lobby to ensure that this electricity bill gets tabled in the next parliament soon. But the political system here is so fragile that we are not clear that the minister will remain minister in the next few months, or some other party will come in. So this is the problem we are facing. I hope this gets resolved, and we can we can again restart the next phase of reform.
Thank you. So I guess we got 5 minutes to break hangover. Right?
Yes, thank you very much. We'd quickly take this break for the polls. So ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't yet participated in the polls, we highly encourage you to do so. And we also know that when we talk about policy and regulations, 1.5 hours is definitely not enough, but still we're trying to get to the most important topics, and so would like to also encourage all of you to kindly participate in this question that we have in the app. So I hope that you've gone to the app. It'll just take 5 seconds. If you just go to the poll, you'll see some active polls. It is in session 6, so there are 2 questions. Why has it taken so long to license power trading activity in Nepal is the first question. The second is, why has Nepal still not finalized its own cross-border power trade policy? You would see 3 options in the second question and 4 options in the first question. So quickly, if our dear participants and audience would be interactive and just cast in your votes so as to see what the audience here thinks. Why has it taken so long to license power trading activity in Nepal? The 4 options are lack of long-term vision, frequent changes in the government, legal complexities, and prefer the status quo. And the other question that we have is, why has Nepal still not finalized its own cross-border power trade policy? The 3 options we have present for all of you: still getting to terms with Indian policies, lack of homework, and lack of political will. So I'm sure all of us definitely have our own options. So if you can just cast in your vote here. Session 6, 2 questions. And we also have some questions for the panel here.
While there's a pause, I just want to take 30 seconds. People who are forgotten, I want to thank them. Join me, the AV people out there, and our beautiful mistress, a charming mistress of ceremonies. She's doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yes, a lot of effort has been made into really getting the best out of the audience as well, making sure that their voices are heard as well, they are able to participate as well. So we'd, I think, now like to end the poll, and if the answers can be on the screen, not the answers really, but you know, your thoughts as to what you feel or how the audience here feels, maybe after even listening to our distinguished panel here. So why has it taken so long to license power trading activity in Nepal? The majority of you have voted for lack of long-term vision, which comes in close to frequent changes in the government being in second, legal complexities being third, and prefer the status quo being the last or the least. And next question is also, now we have stopped it, we've completed the poll, which is, why has Nepal still not finalized its own cross-border power trade policy? And you can definitely see the answers here, with the majority of you voting for lack of political will, with 37 votes, 26 votes for still getting to terms with Indian policies, and 12 of you voted for lack of homework. So thank you very much to this fabulous group of participants as well for, you know, participating in this poll. I'd like to hand it back to the moderator for a quick wrap up and maybe one question if we can squeeze in.
Yeah, the one question is addressed to Mr. Barua. Who should regulate if developers in Nepal are following the guidelines of Department of, I think, Electricity? Electricity and Development. Relevant to climate resilience. Who should regulate if they are already following this, is it?
Yes, Dr. Vaidya
Yeah,
asked this
I get the question. Who should regulate if developers in Nepal are following the guidelines of DOED, that's the Department of Electricity Development, I believe, regarding climate resilience? I have two short answers. One is, go read the law, what's in the law. If you don't like the law, try to change it. And the third is, it's really above my pay grade.
Okay, now I hand it to the chairman to give his concluding remarks.
Thank you, Bata sir. Secretary to ERC, Mr. Gogunaz Pant, has elaborated quite a lot of things with regards to electricity trade and regulatory regime of Nepal, what we have been doing in ERC also. And Mr. Raj Barua has initially talked too much about Murphy's Law. Exactly it has happened to Nepal. We had faced COVID, we had faced landslides and Gulf activities, and we have faced, earthquake. So everything has gone. Now we are free. Now we are free of Murphy's Law. Now the power sector of Nepal, the jumbo jet power of sector of Nepal has already left the runway and it started going up. And it will go up. Definitely in a decade or two, it will go up and will be prosperous nation. Okay? And with regards to Kumar Pandey, I mean, we have been working to make level field ground for the private and the government sector also. There's no discrimination at all. So whatsoever private sectors are facing problems, we have been continuously on dialogue and trying to solve the problems. But if there are hundreds of problems, we cannot solve them at once. Let me give you an example. Nepal Bank was established almost 20 or 30 years before the Central Bank of India. When Central Bank, in Nepal, when Central Bank, means Rashtra Bank, established in Nepal, nobody or the Nepal Bank didn't listen to them. But after 30, 40 years, whatsoever the Rashtra Bank says, all the banks, they instantly follow it. For us, it's less than 4 years. So how do you expect everything to be done overnight? But we have been doing all the things on our full pace, although we have got very limited manpower and very limited other resources. But we have been doing all. And many of you are also so much satisfied with us, like we have also provisioned to get right share for developing new projects. And we have provisioned for rights here for paying high interest, paying back high interest rate, and due to that only nearly 50 hydropower projects which were sinking, they came onto life. And the price, some of the price of their share price from 40 rupees has gone to 400, 500 rupees. So those are the things what we have done. So slowly and gradually we are doing, but we are doing and we are working on the right path. We are working on the right path, but somehow there are some political sort of things which we cannot change. While doing so, we have been penalized also by helping the private sector. Actually, it's not helping the private sector, helping the energy sector, helping the power sector. We have been penalized also. So for that, we don't have any command of that. You can go to other places and tell them that, okay, we have to give this and that. It has to be autonomous. It has to be free of political, so on and so forth. You have to go there and you have to tell them, okay? And from our best of knowledge of and intention, we have been doing very well. I have already told you that we have given verdict and decisions to 559 petitions, which is big. And we have already promulgated more than a dozen of regulatory instruments, and we are at the verge of bringing up nearly a dozen of regulatory instruments, okay? And Ms. Fanny Misfeld, it's very good to know that you have helped SAP, South Asian Power Pool. So I request you to work very hard right from today to establish South Asian Power Pool. It's my humble request to you. Whosoever you need to talk, please do that so that it will help all the nations of this region and all the population of this region also. Anjan Nipan has said that definitely electricity trade has to be incorporated. But let me tell you one thing. I mean, the Electricity Act promulgated in 1992 was really, really forward-looking. It has given so much of facilities for the private sector developers. And I was also involved with that. And the motto was that government alone cannot do all the development works with regards to power sector. So private sector needs to come there, along with private sector or public and private PPP model, something like that. So we have given quite a lot of facilities for the private sectors, but somehow we lost a decade or so in the transition, but now it has already started, and a new act will be put on the parliament. The Energy Minister has already said in the morning, and the Prime Minister also said in the morning. So let's hope that it will come up, and the energy market, energy trading will be given to the private sector also. Definitely, we have to have multiple players in the energy market, energy trading, as well as on the development of transmission line, cross-border transmission lines also. So my personal as well as from ERC, our full support will be there for the private sector. And okay, I think Dr. Ramesh Ananda Vaidya, yeah. He asked Mr. Barua who should regulate climate resilience, okay? I mean, climate resilience. In the previous section, I was also there also, he took me there, and they have been talking about climate resilience, climate friendly, blah, 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 so this and that thing. And let's not go to the jargons. English is not our word. Let's not go after the jargons. Climate resilience, climate something like that, okay? Any hydropower project or any other project has to be technically feasible, economically viable, socially acceptable, and environmentally benign. It has to be there. It is the must. For that, Ministry of Environment is there to take care of all the things. For monitoring, Department of Electricity is mandated for that. And after completion of the project, 2 years after completion of the project, environmental auditing has to be done by the Ministry of Energy. And at any time, Ministry of Environment can do monitoring sort of things, any sort of checks, they can do that. So it's not one man or one institution, there are very many other institutions which are there. So with this, I thank you all. At this late hours, all are wake up. We are very much glad that all are wake up, and I believe that all are here with the notion that you will work, we will work, all of us will work day and night for developing our clean, green energy and supplying to the South Asian market, by which all of the regions will be able to be prosper and offset some portion of black and brown energy. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye
you very
now.
much. Thank you very much to our session chair, Mr. D.B. Singh, Chairman, Electricity Regulatory Commission. Very, very insightful and engaging discussion, definitely, this sixth session, which was on policy and regulatory dialogue. May I please invite on stage Mr. Prakash Dalal, Executive Committee Member of IPPAN, to present this token of appreciation to our session chair, to our moderator, and to our panelists, who really brought some amazing points forward on policy and regulatory dialogue. I must say, Nepal, being the battery of South Asia, has a really nice ring to it, and I hope that that will happen as we move forward in broadening green energy markets for South Asia and for Nepal as well. We'd like to thank our session chair, Mr. D.B. Singh, Chairman, Electricity Regulatory Commission, and we'd like to thank him for his presence. We'd also like to thank our moderator, Mr. Pankaj Batra, former Chairman, Central Electricity Authority, India, for wonderfully moderating this session with these esteemed panelists. We'd also like to thank Mr. Gokarna Raj Panta, Secretary, ERC, Nepal, for his valuable insights in this session. Mr. Raj Barua, Regulatory Expert, USAID, Urja Nepal. We'd like to thank him for sharing US power regulation market with us. We'd also like to thank Mr. Kumar Pandey, Advisor of IPPAN. We'd also like to thank Ms. Fanny Felt-Ringwis, Lead Energy Specialist, World Bank. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your valuable insights in this particular session as well. We'd also like to thank Mr. Anjan Neopane, partner at Neopane Law Associates, for bringing forth and highlighting some important aspects of the Electricity Act and some legal challenges. We'd like to take a group photograph with this panel, and with that group photograph, we shall conclude this panel. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a back-to-back panel right after, so we hope that you will not go anywhere, and please stay with us as we move forward to a very interesting topic, which is regional interest and energy security. So this is the topic that we will begin right after this session. Once again, a huge thank you and gratitude towards our fabulous panelists for this session, which was on policy and regulatory dialogue. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Power Summit 2023.